Welcome to the Club Officer Training Elective session on Lessons Learned sessions. As you may know, doing a Lessons Learned session is part of a DTM project, and it's also a standalone Level 5 elective if you're inclined to want to do that. I've assembled a panel of 3 Pathways DTMs to talk about their experiences organizing and conducting Lessons Learned sessions as part of their DTM projects, and to answer whatever questions you might have. The district decided to run these sessions in the hope of removing some of the impediments to completing a DTM project, which for many provides the biggest challenge to becoming a DTM. We have already had a COT focused on doing DTM projects, and we'll be doing a second session on that topic on January 11th, I believe at 8 o'clock. If that would be of interest to you, please visit the District 31 website to register. And as Christian mentioned, additional assistance may be found in the Pathways DTM Toolkit, which you can use the link that I think Christian is going to post. But in addition, if you go to the DTM homepage, you'll see a DTM Toolkit thumbnail. And if you click on that, it'll take you right to the toolkit. The contents currently include questionnaires answered by all but 2 of the Pathways DTMs. It turns out that there's only 13 in the district at this point. The questions dealt with their DTM projects, what they did, issues that arose, so forth. There's also the DTM project manual published by Toastmasters, which officially you're not supposed to be able to see until you've completed 1 path and 3 levels in a second path, but you can also do it by going to the toolkit. And it has interviews with the Pathways DTMs, or at least 8 of them for now. 8 interviews have been completed, hoping to complete more interviews before the end of this Toastmasters year. And it will also include video recordings of the 2 DTM project Club Officer training sessions I'm running, as well as these 2 Lessons Learned sessions. If at any point during the session you have a question or comment, the group is small enough, just raise your hand, or if you have a chance to just chime up, that's fine as well, or press the hand raised icon. And I'll try to notice you. If I don't, just interrupt me. So with that, more than lengthy enough introduction, I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves, including a sentence or 2 about their DTM projects. And I'll start with Missy Oliver.
Hi, everyone. My name is Misty Oliver. I am currently a DTM, and I will be one of your panelists today. My home clubs are Advanced Orators, which is an advanced club, as well as Toastmasters in Motion, which is a corporate club. I've been a Toastmaster member for over 5 years, and I currently work for a medical device organization. What was the other fun fact? Oh, you want a fun fact?
What the heck?
This morning, I went outside. I have chickens. They're new, and one of them laid their first egg. So I'm a proud chicken egg mama today. So that's my fun fact today. Thank you.
Very good. Maybe we can learn more about the chicken a little later in the session. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Dale. I've been with the Toastmasters 18 years, and I belong to Clean Harbors Toastmasters, which is an open corporate club. And I've actually completed 2 DTM projects. The first one was, I did it during the pandemic, and so it was completely virtual, and I was teaching members of my club how to do DTM projects. And so this did mean I was mentioning to some very new members what a DTM project was like, but it seems as though this project was met with enthusiasm, and so it was just good to give them the exposure of what it is like to do a DTM project. And then my second DTM project I did last year while I was a division director, where I went around to visit all the clubs within my division, and I realized partway through, it's like, hey, this is a project. And so I let my area directors know, and that I told them their goal was going to remain exactly the same. It's just that as a division director, I was going to just also go around to visit all clubs. And so that's what the second DTM project was about.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And finally, Trevor.
Everyone, I'm Trevor Crippen. I've been in Toastmasters for 10 years. I'm a member of Norwood Toastmasters, which meets in person in Norwood, and Copley Square Toastmasters, which meets online every Tuesday, still online. I have done 2 DTMs. The first one was in the original program, and then I was the second Pathways DTM in our district. And for the Pathways DTM project, I built it around one of my experiences as program quality director during the summer of 2020, which meant I was in charge of trainings like this around the district. So I built that project around redesigning a bunch of training material that was exclusively built for in-person training for an online training experience, and trying to do something creative that actually worked in that context without having pre-existing materials from Toastmasters. So it was quite the experience doing that, and a lot of fun. And I thought worthy of getting a DTM project done around it. Nice to be here with everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Trevor. And just to get a sense of who's in the audience, just a show of hands, how many of you are here because you're either in the process of doing a DTM project or you want to start a DTM project and you thought this might be good information? Okay, I see a couple. I don't know what the people who aren't on camera are thinking, but have a sense of that. How many are here because they think it would be good to learn how to do it in order to do the level 5 elective? Okay, not many. Okay, all right, a couple on that as well. And how many are here just because they need to get a credit for a for an elective, and this seemed like a good way to do it? Okay, so we have some people who are also very candid, so that's great. So the most important questions are the ones that the audience has. I have some questions I want to ask as well, but I want to give the audience members a chance to ask whatever questions they have on their mind before we start, and then I'll move into mine. So if anybody has something, I will then start with mine. So the first question, and I'll throw it up to any of my panelists who want to take it, is what makes a lessons learned session effective? What would you point to the key elements? Okay, Missy.
Thank you, David. Lessons learned. I absolutely love just learning things that can make me improve better. I know most of you, maybe all of you, have had those situations where you maybe gave a speech or you did a project at work or project within Toastmasters and everybody said, "Oh my gosh, great job." And it was a great job, but then at the same time you're sitting there thinking like, how can I improve, right? Because we want to keep on that track of making ourselves better and improving. And the lessons learned that I did through my DTM project did just that. And I'm going to get more into it later, but my DTM project was doing a virtual bike event, and we did this, but to answer David's question, through lessons learned this year, even though I have my DTM, we're on our fourth, we're doing the fourth event again, 4 years in a row, better and better and better. So yes, I did my project, but then it's repeated and we've gotten better because of that. So lessons learned is just something that you should seek for anyway, just to make better.
Great,
Thanks.
Thank you, Missy. Let me state a couple of the elements that I think at least were important for me, or a couple lessons that I've learned a few times the hard way. I won't go into those details. But if I were to say the single most important thing, it's to create a safe space for your team members to speak candidly. My last interview was with Missy last night, and we were both talking about how important it is to get candid feedback, to go into a session. Great job, David. You did everything wonderful. Wouldn't change a thing. Feels wonderful, but you don't learn anything for that. So you don't just get candor from people automatically. You have to take the steps that are going to make them willing or feel comfortable to be candid. So the first rule in this area, in creating a safe space, as far as I'm concerned, is to set a ground rule. That's what's said in the lessons learned session stays in the lessons learned session. You're not going to repeat it. They know that it's a safe space, that it has some confidentiality, and then I think people are more willing to be open. The other thing is, it's important not to debate somebody who throws out something that you think is an unfair comment or whatever. Not to say you can't ask clarifying questions to make sure you understand their point, but as you hear the point, whether you think it's reasonable, unreasonable, fair, or unfair, the correct answer each time, as far as I'm concerned, is thank you for your input. And you take the part that's good and you put the part that isn't good aside. So although you can have the discipline about not debating for yourself, you don't know whether your people, your team members who are part of the session are going to follow that rule among themselves. And there's always a risk. And I've had this occur to me. I've done lessons learned, I think, 3 times already. If you have team members who have a different perspective and they start getting into a debate on it and it starts to get heated, you just have to know when to pull the plug on that discussion and to move on to something else. As it gets heated, people get more locked into their positions. Some of the people not involved in the debate might feel uncomfortable. And it's just likely the information you get afterwards is not going to be as useful. I think I had mentioned before about not getting defensive if somebody says something that you think is unfair. And the point isn't to justify your answers. You aren't doing the session primarily for your team members to learn. You're doing the session for you to learn about what you could have done better as a team leader. The first time I did one, I had a member of my team who I really didn't think was carrying their weight. And one of the critiques she had was that so much of the work of the project fell on her. And my initial thought was, are you kidding me? How could you possibly have that view? But for whatever reason, my better angels bit my tongue, heard her comment. There was a kernel in there of truth. There was one useful thing that she said as part of it, which I took away. And the rest, I just, let her speak. And there was some value in it. But the bigger part of the value is there were other team members who then also had some critiques of what I did that seemed more on point to me. And I'm not sure I would have gotten that additional information had I responded in a more defensive way. But the important thing is all feedback is valuable, even if it's not true. If something is said that you think isn't true, it's still how you're being perceived. And that is a reality. You have to take that away. A couple other things dealing more with kind of basic blocking and tackling. I always think it's good to circulate an agenda in advance, listing the issues you hope to cover. So hopefully your team members can prepare ahead of time. And then also state how long the session's going to take. And as we learned in Toastmasters, don't run overtime, even if you have to cut a discussion short. If you promise people they're going to be out in an hour or an hour and a half, whatever time you say, you have to stick to it. Next, it's not always easy to get everybody to participate. Some people are just generally more wordy than others. Some have to be prodded to speak. Others might try to dominate the conversation. And you just have to think of a plan in advance to deal with both kinds of situations. Sometimes it involves specifically calling on somebody to speak if you haven't heard from them for a while, but different people have different styles. It's important to schedule at a time to get as many team members as possible. The bigger the team, the more like herding cats it is. So it's always good to use one of the pieces of software that's available to set up a time. And I find Doodle polls being particularly effective, that you can list, here are 20 different times that work for me. People put in their votes, easy to see who can do which day, and you can figure out when you want to have it. I think usually I have a preference for meeting in person, but if you have a team of any size, that becomes hard. And Zoom is certainly a good alternative. And particularly if you can get more people to show up on Zoom than in person, it's worth doing it. Next, the lessons learned session isn't the end of what you're going to learn. Often somebody will make an interesting point in the session. I've had this happen to me, and you don't want to spend a lot of time on it because you have a limited time for the session. But there's nothing that stops you from calling them later or shooting an email, just saying, you said something interesting. I'd like to follow up with you to understand that point in a little bit more depth, and nothing stops it. And then the last thing, and again, this is something Missy and I spoke about a little bit. It's important to show gratitude. The team members who show up for your lessons learned session are doing you a favor. They're taking some of their time to try to help you to be a little better at what you do. And you should recognize that, and you should thank them for that. Even something as simple as an email after the session or the next day, I think is very important. And this is, I'm sure, a very incomplete list. I'd welcome anybody either from the panel or anybody in the audience to add to it if they have other things that they think are key to do. Sarah?
I was just also thinking from the viewpoint of having done 2 DTM projects and therefore 2 lessons learned meeting. I realized the second time around I was just more comfortable doing it, and I was just thinking I could do a lessons learned meeting more informally, and so that you don't necessarily have to be just in the environment of following exactly how it says within the DTM project, but if you would prefer maybe reaching out to your members of your team individually and just having a conversation with each of them on what they learned versus what you learned, and just go back and forth that way versus getting together as a group, which is how I did it for my first DTM project, just to talk with at a club meeting about the lessons that we learned during the course of the DTM project. Well, it was a more formal environment, and so just the contrast between how I did it for the first time versus the second time.
So as you talk about that contrast, Sarah, you also had 2 different teams or 2 different types of teams in the 2.
Yes.
The first time your team was club members, and the second time your team was area directors. So how did that change how you approached it?
Oh, well, and also certainly not only by being club members, there certainly was some people who were new to Toastmasters. And so when it comes to new Toastmasters, I felt as though I needed to explain a little bit more about what I was doing, since I didn't want to talk over their heads. And so I think that was certainly a difference talking with club members versus area directors. And area directors, because of who they are, they do know more. And I felt as though I didn't need to explain as much to them, except for the aspects of the project itself, because they did already have a knowledge of Toastmasters that the club members did not.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. In a number of places, if you're a leader, you have to meet people where they are. You can't expect them to meet you where you are. And just having a different focus depending on who your team was, I think is a very important point. Trevor, I don't know if that was a raised hand or.
Yeah, I'll just tack on one final point to that, which is I think it is really important to know the people that you're working with, not just their skill level, but their comfort level speaking up. When I'm discussing lessons learned with past district directors like Anthony Alexander and Audrey Cretion, who have no problem speaking up and saying their mind, we can just go into it and not put a lot of structure around it, because we can get into the points, and I'm not really afraid that I'm not going to hear what they think. But if you have people who are less comfortable speaking up, like David alluded to, I think that's where it's especially important to set that structure to your lessons learned meeting, in order to build in those opportunities where they're not, the people who are more afraid to speak up aren't going to get bowled over by the people that do all the talking all the time, because you want to build in those opportunities to hear what they think.
Yeah.
So you build your session around your audience in a lot of different ways.
No, important point. I think I see Christy has a point she wanted to make.
It's really not a point. I do have a question on this lesson learned meeting. Is that a requirement for the DTM project? Because I remember, okay. Because what I remember when I read the DTM project manual, it says we need 2 speeches. So the first speech is talk about your plan, right? And then the second speech is to having about the reflection of your whole DTM project journey. So I don't remember seeing this lesson learned.
It is towards the end, because you can think of those 2 speeches as a before and an after speech, and then essentially right before the after speech, so to speak, right before the second speech, you do the lessons learned meeting.
It might not have been I don't know if it was a requirement under the old system, but it's certainly a requirement here. There's
okay.
You do a lessons learned session, you do a 360 is part of the requirement.
Right, I do remember doing 360.
But they're both in there. It's
maybe I missed that. Thank you. I'll go back and read again.
If you don't see it, just shoot me an email on dlintz@verizon.net, and I'll be happy to point it out to you.
I'm sure it's my miss. Thank you.
But as we say that, it actually segues into a question for Trevor, who, when I interviewed him, made the point that both on the 360 we just talked about and on the lessons learned, there's a formal way to do it. As Sarah mentioned, sometimes it makes sense to do it in a different way that you think is going to be more effective to get to the point of it, but that does not meet the specific letter of the law, but certainly meets the spirit of the law. And Trevor, maybe you could explain about how you did your lessons learned session and why you thought it was a better approach than the traditional one.
Well, in the case of my DTM for the Pathways program that was built around this club officer training reinvention, I kind of had two different tiers of people that I was groups of people I was working with that I was trying to extract some sort of lessons learned from, and it didn't make sense to put these groups together. So I had a recap meeting with Audrey and Anthony, who were the other two members of the district trio at the time, and we kind of just dove in for an hour and talked about what lessons we've learned over the process of working on these trainings over that summer, with the goal of setting ourselves up for the winter trainings to do even better, and then moving forward. And then the other group of people were a bunch of individual volunteers who came to one particular session to do a training under this new format. And there was a lot of them, and B, I'd already asked them for an hour of their time to do a training, or sometimes even 2 or 3 hours. So it didn't make sense to ask them separately for an extra full hour of a meeting to go over lessons learned from that one training session where they volunteered. So instead, it was more important to get smaller bits of feedback from that group of people and learn what I could without putting a burden on them. And I'll tie that into the 360 evaluation that David mentioned as well, where you have, if you've ever seen it from Pathways, you have this giant PDF questionnaire, and you try sending those out to people. I don't know if anybody's ever tried sending those out to people. It takes a lot to get them back, because it's a lot of work you're asking people to do, and it's a little bit overwhelming. I've filled these things out, and you sit here thinking 75% of it is not applicable to the things that you observed in the leader, and you get this sense of dread trying to fill it out, and guilt that you're not providing good information because you don't know how to answer all the questions, and so you put it off, and don't want to send it back unless the person asking for it asks for it 4 or 5 times as a reminder, and eventually you kind of send it back badly filled out. That's been my experience with them. And so I feel that it's more important to make it easy for the people that you're already asking a favor to provide feedback to you, for them to provide back useful and actionable feedback. So I'll take parts of the evaluation that are applicable, ask them those things, kind of drill it down so that I'm eliminating all the stuff they're going to have a not applicable answer to anyway, and try to get that feedback from, hone it down into a Google survey that's easy to just fill in a few things and click a submit back to you, instead of a fillable PDF, which, bless fillable PDFs, but they always have a way of locking on you and getting messed up in the transition. So just make it as easy as possible to get the information back, because that's the important thing. It's actually learning from the lesson. It's not filling out this broad form to the letter, which Toastmasters needs to make that large in order to cover everything, but you personally may not need everything covered. And I would apply the same lens to the lessons learned sessions, where adapt those to your audience. There's no one size fits all lessons learned session. You want that to fit the people that you're working with, and the feedback that you're looking to receive.
So I see your hand up, Aida. Let me just make one point about what Trevor said, and then I will give you a chance. One of the important things to remember about this project, or virtually everything you do in Toastmasters, there's always a very detailed set of instructions about what you're supposed to do on the lessons learned. At A, do this, then B, do this, then C, do this, in the sense of a checklist. And it's important not always to take that checklist literally. There's nobody in Toastmasters International who's going to compare what you did for your project against that checklist. Indeed, nobody at Toastmasters International is going to look at it. The decision about whether your DTM project is approved or not approved resides with your club's vice president of education. So certainly it's worth explaining to the vice president of education, I didn't do a traditional lessons learned session or a traditional whatever. The reason I didn't is I thought doing it this way would be more effective. And it's important to get that vice president of education's buy-in so he can comfortably approve it. But at the end of the day, you want to do what's ever going to be most effective. And I think, particularly with Toastmasters, it's easy to get very hung up on the letter of the law instead of the spirit of the law.
Right.
So Trevor, as a former district director, is giving us all permission to try to stretch to the spirit where it makes more sense. And I'd encourage everybody to take advantage of that. Aida, I see your hand up.
Yeah, good morning or good afternoon. I'm from the Novartis Toastmaster Club in Cambridge. I wanted to comment on Trevor's comments. I actually like what you're saying about not sticking to the form, the PDF, when it's long and does not apply, and adapt it to where you think it adds value. Because many times these surveys, like you said, they're very generic. But how can we, we do not need to reinvent the wheel every time. Is there a way that some of these forms can be shared and people can use them? I guess it does take time to make new surveys or create new ones. And is there any way that we can give feedback to Toastmaster International to make things easier? That's my comment. Thank you.
So I guess I would say two things in terms of feedback to Toastmasters International. You can write to education, you can write to various parts in Toastmaster. Not to be cynical, I don't think they're always the most responsive operation. You can write to Stefano McGee, and we can provide you with his email, who was a former district director, then became, Trevor, I don't recall what his next title was.
He's going to become second VP of all of Toastmasters.
He
right
was the more senior role. Now he's going to be in an even more senior role, and he is very good about responding to emails if there's a specific concern. So to actually be able to refer to somebody who at least knows you by the fact that you're part of District 31, I think is more effective. In terms of anything that you're hearing from the panelists or that you can see in the interviews with the panelists or the questionnaires, everybody who responded to my questionnaire said they were happy to take an email or a call or whatever from people working on their DTMs to give them some advice, not a promise to be your mentor, but to take a call. And I'm sure if there's somebody who did something in a particular way that you'd like to learn more about it, they'd be more than happy to chat with you about it. I see Tim has his hand up, so.
Yeah, thank you, David. I think my question is kind of similar to Christie's, and I think I'm missing some context here, which is, I believe I've seen lessons learned as a speech in a level 5, but I get a feeling that we're talking about something different here. And there's something in the whole DTM project, which I was hoping we could talk about, like how do you select a good one? And is this a part of it? Because since I haven't applied for that yet, or really given it a whole lot of thought, because the lessons learned that I haven't looked at it in a whole lot of detail, but when I've glanced through it, it seems to be talking about yes, a fairly standard speech about almost anything. This seems to be something at a whole different level. Well, or maybe I've just misinterpreted it. So perhaps I'm just missing some whole context.
I think I can answer that. I was because wait, there also is that level 5 elective that says lessons learned, and then within the DTM project, it's asking you to do that project within there. I think they are identical.
Yeah, I think that's right. You're right that when you do the elective, there's a lessons learned speech you give, but it's not simply giving a speech, it's also doing a lessons learned session. So although the DTM project does not require you to give a lessons learned speech, it requires you to do a lessons learned session the same way that the level 5 elective does. So in that sense, it's the same thing. In terms of choosing a good DTM project and some of the other things you mentioned, if you come to the session scheduled for January, that's what the focus of that session is. This one's just on the lessons learned.
All right.
Right. Sarah, go ahead.
Well, I was also in reference to the 360-degree evaluation form for a DTM project. You really only need to get one. So certainly you may appreciate feedback from everybody, but if you find that you're not necessarily getting them to respond back to you and fill it out, just bear in mind for the project, you really only need one, even though you would welcome the information from everybody.
All right, good. Eileen? You're on mute. Eileen, you need to unmute.
So I have a DTM that goes back to the old program and have not even looked as far yet as the level 5 DTM project. So I'll share an observation, and I don't know exactly how it differs, the old project to this new project, but listening to you, it's sounding like the new projects all need to be, well, maybe not, Toastmaster topic based. So your DTM project, and clarify this to me, DTM projects do not need to be Toastmaster business related. Is that correct?
The requirement for a
Yeah.
DTM project is do a project that will benefit an organization. So
So to
DTM,
that point,
Toastmasters is an organization, would satisfy the requirement, but there's other organizations. So
so
Missy,
to
for
that
example,
point,
I didn't
exactly.
get to her. Missy did one that was for her company, a project that was company based.
Yep. So one of
And
the
there really is no equivalent to a project in their previous system. The DTM project is new with Pathways.
Okay, so one of the things that I look back on and often felt was I kept putting off my DTM, putting off my DTM because of the project and thinking, oh my God, that project is going to drain so much energy and resources. And after I did it, I was like, for goodness sake, I had so many work-related opportunities to define that as my project and then follow the guidelines within the Toastmasters that I could have had my DTM project finished years before, which probably would have given me my DTM years before because I had so many of the other requirements. So, you know, I suspect I'm not the only person who ever, in a sense, thought that I couldn't think about what am I doing professionally, work-wise, and how can I use that work to actually craft a project?
Yeah, I see. Missy has her hands up, so I'm interested in that comment, but I also want to have a question for you, Missy, about your how you structured your lessons learned session and how you were able to do it in a way that you got lessons from it that helped the second
Right.
time,
I'm
and the third and the
interested,
fourth time you did it.
Yeah, no, so it's a good question. And just to comment on, it's Eileen, correct? Eileen,
Right.
I was the same way when I heard about there's a DTM project that you can do and accomplish, and I'm very goal oriented and competitive in my own sense. I'm like, I don't have time for that. Like, how in the world am I going to do that on top of everything else, right? And after speaking to a couple of people that already had their DTMs and then looking within my current life, work life, the project I ended up choosing was something that I was passionate about, but it also overlapped in work. So I kind of like checked 2 boxes and nailed, or 2 birds in 1 stone kind of thing.
Yep.
And so my project, so I work for an organization that's really supports community and helping others. And I work for Johnson & Johnson. And so I looked at that, and then the pandemic happened on top of it. How could we do this? And my project was a virtual project. The team that helped me do this project was global, and the participants were all global. Like, we had about 72, 73 bicyclists globally, different time zones. And how do you keep them? With my project, I wanted to, have an event with impact. Yes. Manage a team. Yes. Have some engagement. That was a challenge. Education. Yes. Empowerment and inspire. So we checked it off, but doing the lessons learned, it was kind of twofold. One, I kept like a personal journal of what was taking place, areas of improvement. And when I was discussing yesterday with David about DTMs, I said, sometimes when you go to your lessons learned, and yes, there is the form, the 360, and I've done that with, some of the points needed for your DTM. You have to be a leader. And I see, hey, Christy and our PRM team, and I see others on the call that have been part of some aspect of the DTM, and you have those forms, and it's painful. It's really painful. But what I did was I did them in smaller groups. I was aware of who they were that I was talking to, because I wanted them to continue. I didn't want to scare them off. And it's a similar thing as somebody new comes into your club. You're not going to give them an evaluation on their speech based on like a seasoned speaker. You'll probably never see them again. They'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm never coming here again. You pick one thing and you say, everything else was great. You just pick your battles. But what I did was I put forth an evaluation against myself, and I opened up the conversation. So if you're going to be doing lessons learned and you want to start engaging the group to kind of, give you some feedback, that's what you want. You want to hear that so you can improve. Start not so much attacking yourself, but just say, you know what, like, I think I could have done better. I should have, grouped the teams a little bit better with time zones, because that was like a pain point for people. We had to engage kind of like social media on a bike app. And we had people in Australia, we had people in Singapore, so at 2 a.m, you're getting a notification, oh my gosh, and you have to go on their thing and say, great job, and we're half asleep. So it's how do you make things so it's not like super painful, but it gives everybody walked away with a perspective of like, I can do this, and hence we're 4 years in. But I would just look at your audience, like David said, and Trevor said too as well, like, who are you talking to, and how can you approach that in a way that you can get what you want, but you're not going to really scare them off, because you want them to stay and you want them to do it again or replicate what you did, and just approach it that way. And if they go further into it, lead with that. But it really helps us as like leaders in future situations on how to deal with giving feedback or trying to get feedback from somebody for yourself.
Yeah, well said. I see Glenn has his hand up.
So I have a question basically, but this is in response, but first in response to what Missy just said. So Missy, in your case, your project, your audience was your project team members, right?
No. So so what we did was we held a bike event. It ran 2 weeks. We had random teams, and there was like different challenges, like team with the most miles, things like that. The people that participated in this fundraiser, they paid $25 to become part of this event. The money went to World Bicycle Relief, and we were purchasing bicycles for individuals in other countries so that they can get to work, they can get to school. Okay. And so we did an outreach marketing within Johnson & Johnson, and we also had them, they can expand it to their families. And so that was the audience of our, or the participation people were that. The team itself was people that I tapped
Well,
on the shoulder or we're
yes, yes.
interested in doing something community to fulfill a requirement for our work because we have to do a community service
Okay.
thing for Johnson & Johnson. So that
Right.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes, it does basically.
Okay.
Right? So the lessons learned that you do, it is actually related to the project you've done, right? It doesn't have to be a Toastmasters audience necessarily.
No, so I did lessons learned with my projects, but I also incorporated when I did my speech, the 360 information I got, because it's not just your project. You have to be a leader, an officer or a leader in the district. There's like other requirements and you're
Right.
going to be getting 360s from them.
Okay.
I kind of looped it all together because I went into this into just the DTM project with a goal of improving myself so I could be better and make more money. And a story, like you want to get into a
Okay.
better position at work, you want to make more money. Like
Right.
how
Right,
do you
right.
become better? And it's different for everyone. It's not the same. But so if you lead with purpose, every piece of information when you lead a team, like PRM team, and when you become an area director or whatever roles that you decide to take, it's that feedback is all part of that big
Okay.
puzzle picture of what you want to achieve. So I incorporated everything.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think we're,
Okay, so I guess
I'm sorry, I was just saying, I can see from Christian that we're about 2 minutes away from running out of time, so
Ah,
didn't mean to cut this short,
Oh.
but
so.
we-
All right. So just final question for you then, David, basically, right? So is there a statute of limitations for what projects I can use for my DTM project, for example? Because I have done like that way as in leadership roles. I am in a leadership role in my company essentially, right? So I've done many projects. I've actually even done the lessons learned level 5 project in and of itself in my club in the past. So
yeah,
the question is,
so
do I
the-
have to do another project going forward, or could I use something that was done in the last 1, 2, 3 years? Like, is there a statute of limitations, I guess, basically?
So what I would say is, first, I'm not the arbiter of it. It would be your vice president of education. So I'm simply giving this as an opinion.
Okay.
The issue isn't so much a statute of limitations, and the issue isn't whether you did a project. The issue is whether you did the project in the way you're being asked to do it under
Okay.
the way
Guidelines.
Pathways DTM is described.
Okay.
So if you had a leadership
It's supposed to
project,
do a before speech if you've already done it, because there is that before speech. And so going back and doing something you did a few years ago, I don't see how you can do a before
Yeah.
speech.
Okay, I
yeah,
see.
I
Okay.
mean, that's one issue, but the other thing is it gives you a process about how you're supposed to do it. So you want to do a project where you're getting this done. I mean, you might be able to talk your vice president of education into anything, but
No,
the point is, are you getting the benefit from what you're supposed to out of Toastmasters if you're
Right.
just
Okay.
trying to figure out a way to check a
Sure.
box? Before we end, just quickly, I'd like to thank my panelists for showing up, so we can give them a round of applause. And I'd like to thank also the audience for a number of good questions, helping to make this a livelier session. All that's really wonderful. I see a heart from Aida, so I appreciate that. And some clapping hands from Stephanie. If we have 1 more minute, if anybody has a closing thought, otherwise I think I'm going to keep Christian happy. And
Oh, I just want to point out one thing. Don't bite off more you can chew. There's no time minimum in the DTM project. And so if you want to do a small project, just as long as you follow the guidelines, I'd say that's fine.
All right.
And I just want to add too, if anybody wants to reach out to me or you just need it to bounce off anything, like I'm definitely a resource for that. So feel free to virtually knock on my door.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, everybody on this call, myself and the other panelists have already said they're happy to take a call or an email. So feel free to reach out to them or any of the other DTMs who've filled out my survey. And by going to the toolkit, you can see that. So Christian, I think I landed the plane on time, but okay, I see a thumbs up.